Hi, my name is Libertas. Our website is libertyman.online. That's libertyman.online. And as always, this is our sign. It's the universal symbol for sign language for I love you. We do that because our Lord and Savior commanded his disciples at the Last Supper and in that time frame that he was going to give a new commandment that they were to love one another as he had loved them. So today we're doing a special on the opening battles of at Lexington in 1775 on April 19th. These were the first soldiers to give their lives or shed their blood, and should be the first that we memorialize on this Memorial Day. Sadly, these men and what they accomplished has been put on the back shelves of history and no longer is taught in our schools. One of the reasons for that is the militia companies were led and or trained by their pastor or their head elder. So they would all be what was considered the men's Sunday school group. And that's the way it was. And so this is what Christian men did for their families and for liberty. And what they accomplished on this day changed the world forever. And so I'm going to share as quickly as I can the highlights of that event. But I'm going to share some things with you that have not been taught in over 150 years. That may be shocking to you, it may be enlightening to you. That's up to you. I'm a historian. I present the truth. Just because I present something that contradicts what you've seen on TV or in history books, even at your universities, I can back up everything I say with original documents. Original documents. So anyway, with that in mind, let's start with a share screen here and see if we can go through some things. This is Lexington Green in Lexington, Massachusetts. This is a monument that was erected here to honor the Minutemen. This was not the men that were on the green that day. They were a militia company. They were not a Minuteman company. But the thing about this is there's a road going down across the green this way, and there's one going this way. And if you look, this comes to a point. So this green is a triangle, which is very important when we get to the actual contest. Down this road, this is going north, is the parsonage of Jonas Clark. And I'm going to scroll down real quick and show you his home, the Jonas Clark House parsonage. And this is what it looked like on that day, would be these two parts of the house. And then back here is an addition to the original property, which is a visitor center and mini museum. And this is also the waiting room to go on the tour through the house. But this is where John Hancock and Samuel Adams were staying on that night. They were part of the Provincial Congress at Concord, but since John Hancock was related to Jonas Clark and he grew up in this house with his grandfather, they were here fellowshipping. And to this day, nobody is sure who was the true leader of Massachusetts, whether it was John Hancock or whether it was Jonas Clark. So back to the green. This is a picture of the green from the position of the militia company. I am going too fast through this. I am sorry. Here it is. This is the position where the militia company was stationed. The parsonage is down here about 800 yards. This is the Jonathan Harrington house. Over here is the Monroe house. And it's about 20 yards here. Right over here is Buckman's Tavern, which played a vital role in the events of the day. And you see here on the stone that when they assembled that morning around somewhere between 1 and 1:30, they assembled their militia company of about 130. They didn't know exactly what was going to happen or what was going on. The only thing that they knew was that William Dawes and Paul Revere had arrived at the parsonage at about midnight, had given them the news that the British were on their way to Concord. They also gave them news that it was rumored that they had orders to capture John Hancock and Samuel Adams. And with that, they called out the militia. And so when they gathered together, at this time in the morning, around 1 o'clock and ending around 1:30, they were told by their head elder and captain of their company, John Parker, to stand your ground, don't fire unless fired upon. But if they mean to have a war, let it begin right here. This is the Jonathan Harrington house. These are my personal photos, and I'm not the best photographer, but that tells you that that's his house. But here is the view from what we just saw. So right here is where that stone marker is, and this is where the militiamen were mustered. And if you look down here, you see the point of the green. Now, right here was their meeting house, which was I believe a 3-story building, and you could not see down the road in any way, shape, or form because of this large building right here. It was their church. Their church, though the Puritan churches did not have steeples, so they had a separate lone standing bell tower over in this area. That'll be significant when we get to the actual battle. By this time, Paul Revere and William Dawes had gone on to Concord to continue spreading the news and help with the alarm riders. There were hundreds and hundreds of alarm riders that night. Paul Revere and William Dawes had a specific mission as liaison between Joseph Warren in Boston and the Provincial Congress and Samuel Adams and John Hancock. They were the message riders between those. And so their duty that night was to warn Hancock and Adams of what was going on. They did spread the alarm while they were going, but their primary function was to get to Hancock and Adams. And there were literally hundreds of what we would consider like Pony Express riders who had their assigned job to warn certain towns, and then from there and there and there, and it just goes out. And they have records of as far as 40 miles away, the alarm was being sounded as early as 8 o'clock in the morning. So with that in mind, Paul Revere was captured about 3 miles down the road this way at about this time frame. He had left the parsonage right after midnight. while he was captured, he told the British Major Mitchell, who was leading a 10-man scouting party, they had orders to go ahead of the column and secure the bridges and capture any alarm riders that they could to keep the mission secret. Well, Paul Revere told him that there were 500 militia mustering at Lexington. Another person that was captured, who was a scout sent out by the militia company, by John Parker, to find the British column to see where they were captured as well. And they had told Major Mitchell that there was 1,000 soldiers or militiamen gathering here at Lexington. So once they found out that information, they decided that it would be a good idea to go back down the road and find the approaching column of British soldiers and tell them of what was going on right here. As they approached, Captain Parker had decided to send his company home because they had no idea where the British Army was at the time. They had sent scouts out, which he didn't know that they were actually captured. And so he said, you know, it's 1:30 in the morning, go home. I've consulted with Hancock and Reverend Clark, and we all agree that get as much rest as you can, stay in some of the local houses around the green here. If it's, you know, you have a relative or people are generous enough to fit you in there. He said, I'm going to go over here to Buckman's Tavern. 50 of the guys decided they were going to go with him. There was another 8 men that were guarding the parsonage. And so they dispersed. And as they were dispersing, Captain Parker told his militiamen to clear their weapons if they had a loaded gun, because he didn't want them out at night and their powder to get wet because of the dew and the moisture. So about 50 men fired their guns up in the air, and these scouts heard it. They're thinking that the shooting had started, so they dismounted their captives and galloped as fast as they could down this road to try and get past here before they had a chance to reload, so that they could go down and either get together with the troops or at least and hopefully get there early enough to warn the troops of what is waiting them when they got to this point. Major Mitchell did run into Major John Pitcairn about 3 miles down the road from here. He had been dispatched from the original column with about 250 light infantry to go ahead of the grenadier companies so that they could secure the bridges at Concord, so that none of the militia companies could get to them while they're there doing their thing of getting the confiscating and destroying the weapons that were reportedly stored there. So Major Mitchell tells Major Pitcairn that there's between 500 and 1,000 militiamen waiting for them right down the road, 3 miles approximately in front of them. So that changes the whole dynamic of the night. So what is supposed to be a secret march to Concord, there's 1,000, between 500 and 1,000 militiamen waiting to stop them right here in Concord. But if you look at the disposition of the field, the militia company is here next to the road to the parsonage. They're over 100 yards away from this road over here that leads to Concord. If they wanted to stop the British, they would have been over here. But they weren't. They're here. They're out of the way. They're in a defensive position to watch and monitor the British. They were under strict orders not to fire unless blood had already been shed. under penalty of death. So with this in mind, we have the British coming down the road at a silent march, no drums, no fifes, no flags. They've got all their accoutrements strapped to their side so it wouldn't make any noise. And they're going to do their best to try to get past here and be not molested at all by the militia, as had happened so many times before. When they would go out from Boston, the militia companies would just stand there and watch them, and just everything would be peaceful as long as nobody fired at the other ones, which was always the case. So the militias thought that that would be the case here. So when these guys get about a half a mile away, it's about 4:30 in the morning. Now, what happens at 4:30 in the morning is the people in the Monroe house and the Harrington house and Buckman's Tavern, Captain Parker decides he's going to remuster his militia and have a meeting and give them an update and decide what to do from there. So he leaves here and goes across the street, and he brings William Diamond, their 14-year-old drummer, who just gotten a brand new drum that was donated by the pastor to the militia company, and he was given the order to beat Call to Arms. Call to Arms is a little bit more serious than just assembly. Call to Arms means form up for battle. At the same time, John Parker fired his musket to let everybody that's further away that maybe can't hear the drum roll, that they would definitely hear his signal gun go off. So at that point in time, that's when, go back to the green. About 77 men had time to assemble. From the time that that drum started to beat and the alarm gun went off was just a matter of a few minutes, because 50 people came from the tavern. There were more people at the Harrington house, which is right behind here. There was more people at the Monroe house, it was right here. And there were 8 people down the road at the parsonage that were guarding the parsonage. So 50 plus 8 is 58. So that would need only 19 more people to total 77 at the time that the British arrived on the green. At the same time they left Buckman's Tavern, John Parker had dispatched Thaddeus Bowman to go down the road toward Boston to see if he could find the troops and come back and report. By this time, like I said before, the British, led by the Major of Marines, John Pitcairn, he didn't know anything about infantry tactics. He was a Marine. He's used to fighting in the rigging of a ship, to repel boarders and to fire down from the rigging onto the deck of the opposing ship to attack the officers and the gunners. The Marines were not trained in infantry field tactics. That was a fatal flaw, as we'll see. But he was a half mile down the road when he heard a call to arms and the signal gun go off. He's expecting 500 to 1,000 militiamen to be a half a mile away from him. when he hears a call to arms, he takes that signal as an act of war, according to his writings. So he told his approximately 200 to 250 light infantrymen to come to a halt and load their muskets with powder and ball, live ammunition. He also told them to charge bayonets. When the order for charge bayonets is given, the infantrymen know that they are not to stop for anything until they stick their bayonet in someone. They are not ready or prepared to stop, go through ready, aim, fire, and fire a volley. That's not their purpose. Their purpose is to charge bayonets. So they are given the order to double quick march with leveled bayonets. Major Mitchell is to take 3 companies and come around this side of the church. Major Pitcairn is to come around this side of the church in a 2-pronged attack. The reason they want to charge bayonets is to get amongst the militia before they have time to form up and realize what's happening. If they can close with bayonets, then they'll be on equal terms, because they knew that the militia didn't have bayonets and that they had a better chance at their preferred weapon of the bayonet versus firing a shot. So with that in mind, the militia company, Thaddeus Bowman, comes thundering up to the militia company, telling Captain Parker that the British are half a mile away at Monroe's Tavern. So he tells his men to load their weapons with powder and ball. So they too now have fully loaded weapons. But here again, they are in a defensive position and they're far enough away from the road to not pose an imminent threat to any soldiers that want to peacefully walk down this road, march down this road. They are not going to try and stop 800 British soldiers with 100 militiamen. That's just not going to happen. These people aren't stupid. They're not going to commit suicide and start a war. So with that in mind, if these British soldiers, they had been marching at a 4-mile-per-hour pace, that is 1 mile every 15 minutes. So if they are half a mile away at Monroe Tavern, then they could march at their normal pace and be here in 7.5 minutes. So by the time Thaddeus Bowman had seen them and made it to Lexington Green, the British are already on the move. So if they're marching, they've got 7.5 minutes to show up on Lexington Green. Follow the time frame here. If they're at a double quick march, they are going to get here in half of that time. So let's say 4 to 5 minutes. So by the time Thaddeus Bowman gets back here, it's 5 minutes or less before they see these British soldiers. The first that they know of their whereabouts in concrete form is they hear the cry, "Huzzah, huzzah, huzzah." That's to get the adrenaline up and fire up the troops, because they're about to start a bayonet charge. So these men hear the huzzahs, and out of the darkness comes 3 companies around this side of the church, two companies coming around this side of the church in a double quick march with leveled bayonets. I filmed something like this at the same time of day, 4:30 to 5 o'clock in the morning, with my brother, who was a Marine, and he knows what a double quick march is. So he did a double quick march for 100 yards, which is about this distance here, and he did it in 30 seconds. So from the time they hear the huzzah till the time that a bayonet gets stuck in their breast is about 30 seconds. You follow me? Total pandemonium and chaos. It is pitch black. It's about 4:45 in the morning. You can't see diddly. The sun, they said, was just beginning to change the sky at about 5 o'clock in the morning after the battle was finished, the darkest part of the morning. So with that in mind, let's go up here to this painting. This painting was done 5 days after the battle. Some key things to note here. You see the church, you see the chapel or the bell tower, you see John Pitcairn on his horse here, and he has his arm straight out. I'll show you another picture where they added color, but he is firing his pistol as he gives the order for his soldiers to fire. Here's another thing to note. As they are firing the volley, these men's backs are turned. They are shooting them in the back. When they came around this building at a bayonet charge, Major Pitcairn galloped up in front of them and ordered the militia company to lay down their arms and disperse. Captain Parker initially just stood there. Then he says, in the name of the king, lay down your arms and disperse, you rebels. So Captain Parker tells his men to disperse, but they don't lay down their arms. Remember, this guy is thinking he's being ambushed by 1,000 men. When these guys turn to leave the field with their guns, he fires his pistol at them and gives the order to fire. So the first shot was Major Pitcairn firing his pistol as he gave the command to fire. The British officer would fire field officer would fire his weapon first, taking the responsibility of killing off the enlisted men. But in this situation, these guys are in a bayonet charge at a double quick march. They hear a gun go off in the order to fire. They're not told to stop, form ranks, ready, aim, fire, which takes quite a few seconds to do. That's their field operations manual. They were just told to stop in the middle of a bayonet charge and fire their weapons. That doesn't happen. That's not their orders. That's not what they're trained to do. So a few of them disjointedly fired their weapons up in the air as a warning shot because they see these guys turning to leave. And it's just, imagine a crowd just kind of banging into each other in the middle in the dark, trying to stop themselves from a bayonet charge, and they're given the order to fire. And when they didn't fire for any effect, Major Pitcairn said, "Fire at them, damn you, fire at them." So that's when they fired the full volley and killed 8 and wounded another 10. Here we see a later rendition that was taken from that original drawing, but the significance of this one is this guy right here. You see his dark face? That's Prince Esterbrook. He was a slave. He served in this engagement, the very first battle, and he served in the Continental Army all the way until the Battle of Yorktown in 1781. So he literally served from first shot to last shot. He was the only American soldier to do that. He was also a slave and had to ask permission to join the company because he was exempted. But when you see his signature on the militia rolls, you will see that he was a very educated man and he had very, very nice calligraphy handwriting. So that's just a little bit about that famous guy. Here you see the white puff of smoke coming out of the gun, the pistol right here. And once again, you see the colonials running, the wounded and the dying here. And these guys, as soon as they fired their weapons, they continued to chase these guys with their bayonets. And some of the wounded, they bayoneted to the ground right where they lay. If that's not enough evidence for you, this is the rotunda of the Capitol of the United States of America. At the bottom of the dome of the rotunda is a cyclorama of 360-degree painting of the events of beginning with Christopher Columbus, and I think it ends with maybe the Wright brothers. But nonetheless, this is the Battle of Lexington, and you plainly see the British officer firing his pistol at John Parker. And that's in the capital of the U.S. Capitol, in the rotunda. So if that's not enough evidence that Major John Pitcairn was the guy that fired the first shot, this is Breed's Hill, or Bunker Hill. They had assaulted this redoubt 2 times and were just totally decimated. The British were. They lost thousands of men. But the thing was the Americans only had 3 bullets apiece on average. They averaged 3 bullets apiece. So they jumped up, fired a volley, got back down the parapet. The British would go back down the hill. They say, they were given orders not to fire until you see the whites of their eyes. Well, that'd be point blank. That'd be kind of pointless. But what they did was they put white posts out at 50 yards. So when they got inside that 50 yards, they knew that was the optimal range for their muskets to hit their targets. So they waited till they got in the kill zone before they were given the order to fire. So this is the 3rd attack. And after they fired their 3rd bullet, they had to leave. You'll notice that these men don't have any bayonets. The British were under a bayonet charge. Remember what I told you about a bayonet charge before? Once they're told to charge bayonets, they don't stop until they've stuck their bayonet in someone. So they were excited about getting up the hill this time because they're not just marching. They're at a quick march and they're ready with their bayonets to have at it with the militias. This man here, Peter Salem, somehow still had a bullet. When John Pitcairn got on top of the redoubt and claimed that the day was theirs, he turned around and went into the bayonet charge and shot him square in the chest. Who cares about a field major? That's not going to get any attention. He wasn't royalty. He was of meager means, but he still was an officer, but he was not a general. So why would you have paintings after paintings after paintings of this guy getting shot? What was the importance of this guy getting shot? Well, it tells you right down here in the caption. Here again, this is painted by the same guys that did the painting that I showed you before about Lexington. They did it from the eyewitness accounts a few days after the battle. The shooting of Major Pitcairn, who had shed the first blood at Lexington by the colored soldier Salem. Okay, he was considered a soldier. He wasn't considered a black man. He wasn't considered a slave because he was a free man. He was a soap maker. Anyway, he kills the guy that started. He said the first blood. Okay, so that kind of ends the story. Now you know who fired the first shot. It was John Pitcairn who fired his pistol as he gave the order for his charging soldiers that he had never commanded before in his life to fire at the retreating Americans because they would not drop their weapons. He's expecting a fight of 1,000, not 70. It was total chaos and pandemonium in the dark. So anyway, John Pitcairn fired his pistols. His pistols are on display at the Hancock Clark House in the museum there in a display case. And his name is engraved on these handcrafted silver pistols that were captured later in the day on the return trip to Lexington. So with that in mind, we're back to there again. I want to go to this monument. This is the monument at Lexington Green. It says, "Sacred to liberty and the rights of mankind, the freedom and independence of America, sealed and defended with the blood of her sons. This monument is erected by the inhabitants of Lexington under the patronage and at the expense of the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, to the memory of their fellow citizens, Ensign Robert Monroe, Messrs. Jonas Parker, Samuel Hadley, Jonathan Harrington Jr., Isaac Muzzy, Caleb Harrington, and John Brown of Lexington, and Asahel Porter of Woburn, who fell on this field, the first victims of the sword of British tyranny and opposition, on the morning of the ever memorable 19th of April, Anno Domini 1775. The die was cast. The blood of these martyrs in the cause of God and their country was the cement of the union of these states, then colonies, and gave the spring to the spirit, firmness, and resolution of their fellow citizens. They rose as one man to revenge their brethren's blood, and at the point of the sword to assert and defend their native rights. They nobly dared to be free. The contest was long, bloody, and affecting. Righteous heaven approved the solemn appeal. Victory crowned their arms, and the peace, liberty, and independence of the United States of America was their glorious reward. So this set off the chain of human events that led to the Declaration of Independence. We're now going to look at another screen. Now I'm going to read you the entire casualty list for the Americans for that day. These are the first American soldiers that shed their blood for the cause of liberty and our great nation. They should be remembered above all. Anyway, from the town of Acton, killed Captain Isaac Davis, James Hayward, Abner Hosmer, wounded Luther Blanchard and Ezekiel Davis. Arlington killed Jason Russell, Jason Winship, Jabez Wyman, wounded Samuel Whitmore. Bedford killed Captain Jonathan Wilson, wounded Job Lane. Beverly killed Reuben Kennison, wounded Nathaniel Cleaves, William Dodge III, Samuel Woodbury. Billerica wounded Timothy Blanchard, John Nichols. Brookline killed Major Isaac Gardner. Cambridge killed John Hicks, William Marcy, Moses Richardson. Missing Samuel Frost, Seth Russell. Concord wounded Captain Nathan Barrett, Jonas Clark, Jonas Brown, Captain Charles Miles, Captain George Minot, Abel Prescott Jr. Charlestown killed Edward Barber. Chelmsford wounded Oliver Barron, Aaron Chamberlain. Danvers killed Samuel Cook, Benjamin Dayland, Ebenezer Goldthwaite, Henry Jacobs, Pearlie Putnam, George Southwick. Jothan Webb wounded Nathan Putnam, Dennison Wallace. Missing Joseph Bell. Dedham killed Elias Haven, wounded Israel Everett. Framingham wounded Daniel Hemingway. Lexington killed John Brown, Samuel Hadley, Caleb Harrington, Jonathan Harrington Jr., Jedediah Monroe, Robert Monroe, Isaac Muzzy, Jonas Parker, John Raymond, Nathan Wyman. Wounded Francis Brown, Joseph Comey, Prince Estabrook, Nathaniel Farmer, Ebenezer Monroe Jr. Jedediah Monroe was killed later. That's why he's listed twice. Solomon Pierce, John Robbins, John Tidd, Jason Winship. The town of Lincoln wounded Joshua Brooks. The town of Lynn killed William Flint, Thomas Hadley, Abednego Ramsdale, Daniel Townsend. Wounded Joshua Felt, Timothy Monroe. Missing Joshua Breed. Medford killed William Polly, Henry Putnam. Needham killed Lieutenant John Bacon, Nathaniel Chamberlain, Amos Mills, Sergeant Elisha Mills. Jonathan Parker wounded Eleazar Kingsbury, the son of Dr. Tolman. Newton wounded Noah Wiswell. Salem killed Benjamin Pierce. Somerville killed James Miller. Sudbury killed Josiah Haynes. Asio Reed wounded Joshua Haynes Jr. Stowe wounded Daniel Conant. Watertown killed Joseph Coolidge. Woburn killed Asahel Porter. Daniel Thompson wounded Jacob Bacon. Johnson, probably a slave. George Reed. Totals: killed 49, wounded 41, missing 5. Total loss 95. The British on that day lost almost 300. So three times the number of casualties were inflicted by what they considered as a rabble in arms that weren't capable of standing up to the flower of the British Army. The British Army were running in a panic almost the whole entire 16 miles back to Boston. Say what you will about that day, but we do know exactly who fired the first shot. It was Major John Pitcairn when he fired his pistol, giving his charging light infantrymen the order to fire at the dispersing militia company on Lexington Green. 10 were killed, 8 were killed, 10 were wounded in just a matter of minutes. By 5:19, after the soldiers had a chance to rest for a few minutes and get some water, they formed up at 5:19 a.m., unfurled their flags, gave 3 huzzas, and fired a volley in the air in celebration of their great victory as they marched on to Concord as conquering heroes for shooting that small militia company in the back. That's the truth of what happened on that day. And right there, that was the beginning of what was considered resistance to tyrants as obedience to God. And it's going to take that same type of resistance, knowing that we're obeying God, to stand up to tyranny. And it's our right as American citizens and as Christians to fight for our rights. And hopefully it doesn't come to a shooting match. We can change just about everything with voting in the right people. But nonetheless, we face a hard row to hoe at this point, because we're facing some tyranny that hasn't been seen in hundreds of years, especially on our soil. So God bless. Hopefully you learned something about the first soldiers that need to be memorialized on Memorial Day. And God bless you. This is our sign, which is, I love you. Jesus' commandment to his disciples before he was crucified, that they love one another as he had loved them. God bless.